Today I'm going to talk about the New Horizon conferences that have been held in Iran that have grabbed some headlines here and there but haven't been looked at thoroughly as more of an enterprise beyond the conferences, more about cultural production involving film and publishing. Now, this is part of a wider project that I'm doing on the Islamic Republic of Iran's participation in Islamic and internationalist politics of Black liberation since 1979, when 2 weeks into the hostage crisis, Khomeini ordered the release of women and African American hostages in the hopes that African Americans would pour into the streets in solidarity. But today I'm really looking at a small piece that's related more to our contemporary times, and that's the significance of anti-Zionism in the Iranian cultural diplomacy that's usually associated with former President Ahmadinejad. I want to shed light on how Nader Talabzadeh, a prominent Iranian filmmaker and journalist, is actually the main actor in this story. He passed away just a couple of months ago, complicating my research a bit, but really he was a central figure in Iranian politics, aligned with the hardest line faction of the Revolutionary Guards, close to Iranian President Raisi, access to the supreme leader, and importantly, he played a major role in the building of the Iranian state media apparatus, both at home and abroad, through various different positions he had held. So I want to see how his cultural production and that of his New Horizon network associates contribute to anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist ideas on the American far left. And more specifically, I want to look at the discursive roots of Jewish Voice for Peace's deadly exchange campaign to end the ADL police trainings with Israel. And on this subject, Miriam Ellman's work on how the organization has gone from giving cover to anti-Semitism on the left to actually producing it is very important. This topic is situated at the crossroads of several diverse histories, disciplines, and debates. Today, I'm not talking about the red-brown alliance or red-green or horseshoe theory. I just want to talk about ideological convergences and alignments, because there is rising debate on the American far left about right populist, left-wing populist cooperation and momentum for third-party politics. And of course, any such cooperation and some of the most prominent figures, such as Glenn Greenwald's view, the basis for the cooperation is shared contempt for the Democratic Party, liberalism, elitism, the establishment, which the left now refers to as the deep state as well, and of course, non-interventionism abroad. I'm not making any claims here for or about censorship. I'm identifying vectors of the transmission of ideas. And what I'm just really trying to show today is that while the deadly exchange trope that implicates Israel, and in many cases American Jews, in police brutality in the United States, seemingly originates among Black radical academics and organizers, concurrently, the New Horizon partners and participants of Talabzadeh's network play an important role in popularizing the trope on the left. Okay. Excuse the clunky slides, but these are my notes as well. Now, Angela Davis, in this webinar just about a year ago, explains that the deadly exchange trope essentially dates back to 2010 or 11, when she doesn't list who, but there were discussions on how to incorporate Palestine solidarity into the progressive agenda. And she states here, so that if we talked about struggles against police crime, racism in the United States, there had to be a way to link it to the Palestinian struggles and solidarity activists. So what's going on in 2011? We also have the Occupy Wall Street protests that unleashed a lot of energy. And while it was not characteristic of the entire movement, we do know that The protests certainly involved anti-Semitic individuals as well. Some of these individuals, and one in particular I'll get to later, immediately also join Talabzadeh's New Horizon network and begin to attend conferences, which I'll get to in a second. Now, I also kind of want to jump around between what's going on in Iran to what's going on in prominent circles of the left, where there's agenda setting. And for that, one of the sources I'm using are the programs of the Left Forum, which is a premier annual meeting of radical academics and organizers setting the agenda on the progressive left. And we see here this panel of the Israel Strategic Asset to the Global 1%. This is as Occupy Wall Street's underway. And I'm pointing to this one because the organizations that are listed there, not the anti-Zionist organizations actually, but the others, we will see end up playing a role in the Jewish Voice for Peace campaign later. But we see that the notion and the ideas about the Israeli carceral state and focus on prisoners and such, we see it from the fringe of the Jewish anti-Zionist left, and from a number of figures who really are prominent organizers, including the Green Party leader and former vice presidential candidate, Haji Mubarak. Okay, jumping back to Iran. I just want to quickly note 3 important developments that kind of give way to this new type of cultural diplomacy that we started to see in Iran in the early 2000s. The first thing is Iran's cinematic talents are celebrated internationally. David Duke is touring Russia and the Middle East in the late 90s, as is Farrakhan, the leader of Nation of Islam. And also in 1998 in Chicago, the Black Radical Congress convened for the first time, and that was a meeting of academics and grassroots organizers determined to pursue an internationalist Black left formation. And what's important here is that there was an explicit embrace, which was controversial among some, of the revolutionary Black nationalists. Skipping Road to Durban in Iran's hosting of the preparatory meeting, but to 2005, where Nader Talabzadeh introduces a figure, Michael Piper Collins, to Ahmadinejad. And he is essentially a far-right conspiracist who self-identifies as a progressive, but really has been associated with the right and attacking the ADL since the 90s. And unsurprisingly, David Duke, and other notorious anti-Semites are at the very first gatherings sponsored by Ahmadinejad. 2007, Nader Talabzadeh is very busy, involved in launching Press TV, which we all, I'm sure, are aware of its impact today. And by 2008, he and a cadre of Iranian artists, journalists, and intellectuals that he's been training are frequently hosting American anti-war and interfaith delegations. There were 3 conferences in these years, and the first one, we see that conference partners are not just from the far right, but we also have more of these figures, such as Kevin Barrett, who identify as progressives. And Kevin Barrett specifically, we'll see, is the editor of Veterans Today, which has been identified as part of Russian disinformation campaigns. Now, something important also going on in 2011 is that former Congresswoman and Green Party presidential candidate Cynthia McKinney leads a delegation of journalists and activists to Libya and Iran. And some of them also begin to participate. Other participants are many white supremacist leaders, 9/11 truthers, former intelligence officers, and others fancying themselves as whistleblowers against the deep state, and some high-profile converts, such as Malcolm Shabazz, who's Malcolm X's only male heir. Also important to this story is what I'm calling here the Dugan dimension. Now, his associates are participants in the earliest conferences, the Hollywoodism ones that I just showed. And for him, Iran is integral to his theory of a multipolar world. He envisions a Russian-Shia alliance. There's a fascinating theological element there as well that I can't get into, but that I've also seen Farrakhan express in his interviews in documentary with Talebzadeh. But really, Putin has publicly stated the importance of the creation of a pro-Russian alternative media ecosystem to Russia's foreign policy. And indeed, serious studies from institutions that have looked at syncretic content sharing and disinformation campaigns identify a number of these veterans today. That's Kevin Barrett's, and other outlets in the ecosystem, the alternative independent media ecosystem, that are at the center of conspiracy theories on COVID, Syria, Ukraine. And what they all have in common, of course, is that these outlets are either edited by or saturated with content from participants in the New Horizon network. And what's a little disturbing is that we see the Jacobin recently, when some of the accounts, the PayPal accounts of some of these organizations were frozen temporarily, you see that the premier socialist magazine that's really aimed at the broad left, not the far left, identifies these outlets as left-wing accounts, not the conspiracist lunacy that they actually are. Okay, just a couple of minutes. So a little bit more about some of the participants in the New Horizon network going forward from 2014. Again, Occupy activists, Green Party, Code Pink, and other prominent anti-war organizers, Black radical academics, nationalists, in a variety of artists, because again, after all, this is about his cultural production. Now, of course, we know the Ferguson moment gives center stage, I guess, for national attention to this notion of the deadly exchange trope with Trita Parsi's tweet that was boosted and went viral. Now, this was an important moment for the idea of the deadly exchange trope in national discourse. One new organization founded by a son of a Palestinian diplomat and a Bernie Sanders advisor, the Dream Defenders, they're also integral to this. They promote the exchange, they promote the campaign, they organize Palestine solidarity trips for Black Lives Matter leaders, academics, Green Party members. Okay, so by 2015, with this kind of Ferguson moment in the background, Talebzadeh goes all in and holds a conference specifically on US police brutality against African Americans. And there was a Chicago-based organization that partnered for this specific conference, but at this conference, it's actually not the African American guests that are trafficking in the trope. It's actually radical Occupy Wall Street activists like Caleb Maupin and others who we see are now taking this kind of more abstract idea of the Israeli carceral state to, as we see here, the Harvard University of American police brutality. So we're getting a little more granular with the accusation. You can see here from one of the sessions that these American activists meet with the Palestinian representative, or Hamas's representative to Iran, and discuss strategies. But again, what's important here is what happens when the participants leave. And we see them increasingly, these self-styled progressives, populating the panels at the Left Forum. In 2017, Jewish Voice for Peace formally rolls out their campaign. And if you take a look at the endorsements and the advisory team, we do see that it's essentially the same organization and same actors who were already in 2011 peddling anti-Semitic ideas about Israel and its relationship to the 99% or the 1%. And what we have here is basically the campaign in the presence of Angela Davis and Judith Butler and other prominent progressives endow the campaign with sort of a shiny facade that obscures a lot of the far right-wing influence in the trope. You had original signatories to the 1998 Black Radical Congress who are involved in the Jewish Voice for Peace campaign. But again, alongside this, what is obscured is these two panels are from 2017. And these participants, again, in 2017 at the Premier Left Forum, we see conspiracy theorists and far-right individuals who are already identified as part of disinformation networks, yet the Left Forum allows and continues to allow their presence in the forum. Basically, my work just aims to look more broadly at Talabzadeh's network and look at their cultural production, and it really does show that while the trope originates with Black radical leaders and is sort of just kind of passed on to the most relevant anti-Zionist Jewish group, because you see it started off with the Fringe, and then they bring it to Jewish Voice for Peace. In actuality, concurrently, Talabzadeh's network is playing a major role through independent media in popularizing the trope for both the left and for the right.